Hi, I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here, please consider making a contribution. Go to our website. It's easy to do. Thank you in advance for that contribution. So we are looking at work from Brené Brown in her best-selling book, The Gifts of Imperfection. And what she has done, as I think most of you know, is she has spent her life as a researcher trying to understand what goes into wholehearted living. And kind of by backing her way into it, I would say, through researching and understanding authenticity and shame and vulnerability. And so in her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, she identifies 10 key areas, and we're into the third one. Each of these stand alone. And this is the one that is all about developing and cultivating that resilient spirit. I like how she opens the chapter with this particular quote from Terry St. Cloud. She could never go back and make some of the details pretty. All she could do was move forward and make the whole beautiful. She could never go back and make some of the details pretty. All she could do was go forward and make the whole beautiful. And that is in part what resilience is. Resilience is faith in action. Resilience is our bounce back ability when life throws us a curve, when we are hit with something that we hadn't anticipated and that we didn't want. Whenever I think of bounce back ability and resiliency, I think of my brother and myself when we were kids, and my mom had bought a toy for my brother that then, back in those days, was a really popular toy, didn't run on batteries, wasn't connected to the internet, nothing like that, but it was a blow-up kind of punching bag in the shape of a clown with sand in the bottom of it. Some of you are nodding your heads, right? You know what I'm talking about. And the thing with this little punching bag wasn't, I don't believe it was to teach kids how to punch, but in the act of striking that punching bag, the punching bag went down, and then what did it do? It got back up. It always righted itself. It always righted itself. To me, that is such a simple and yet profound visual of resiliency. And each of us has that ability within us. Some of us have cultivated it a little bit more, but each of us has at least some of it, and each of us can develop more of it. That's what we're going to explore in part today. Some of what Brené found in her research of resilient people are these things. Resilient people are resourceful and they're good at problem solving. If they can't get it one way, they're going to try to find how to get there another way. They're resourceful, they're problem solvers. And that doesn't mean they're brilliant people necessarily, but they're not going to let something stop them without trying to think their way around it or over it or under it or through it or just wait for it to disappear. Second, resilient people are more likely to seek help. Oh, is that important? And oh, does that fly counter to the way some of us may have been raised? And particularly if we are male, we have really probably been given a double dose of needing to do everything yourself. That it is a sign of what to ask for help? But it's not. It's not. In fact, it takes great self-awareness to ask for help. We have to have the awareness that we're in a place where we haven't been able to figure it out ourselves, or we don't know how to do it alone. So it takes self-awareness, and it also takes vulnerability, doesn't it? It takes the willingness to admit, right now, I'm falling short of what I know to do, but I bet somebody might have a piece of the answer, if not all of the answer. So it takes self-awareness, it takes vulnerability, and it takes courage. And what we will often find is when we will ask for help, help will be there. Help will be there. What she also found in her research about resilient people is they believe that there is something that they can do. See the point I just made before. It may be asking for help. That is something that we can do. And what she also found is that they have relationships, they have social connections, friends, family that can encourage them. You know, when Jesus, our teacher and way shower, sent his disciples out, his students, to spread his teaching, to spread his message, he was so wise in that he did not send them out individually. He sent them out in pairs. I'm convinced he sent them out in pairs because he understood that the journey could be difficult. And in the difficulty, it can be made more pleasurable and easier if we have a little bit of support along the way. I am sometimes surprised and sometimes disappointed when I look at us as a congregation, at some of the ways that we show up here or don't show up here when we're challenged. And what I mean by that is sometimes people, because unity and new thought is such a positive approach to life, sometimes when people are going through their toughest times in their life, they go, oh, I can't go to church because everybody there is happy. Everybody there has it all together, and I sure don't have it all together. That's the time to be here no matter what. And let me tell you, there is not one of us in this room that has it all together. We're all dealing with different stuff in different ways to different degrees, but we are all evolving and growing and dealing with our own version of stuff. Or instead of maybe, so we may come, but the other thing that sometimes we forget to do is to lean into and rely on the prayer support that's here. We are here truly for each other, truly for each other. These are some of the ways that we build a more resilient spirit inside of ourselves. So those were some of the things that she found out, Brené Brown found out, in her research of looking at resilient people. She also discovered or identified that there are 3 aspects of resilience. I'm going to tell you what they are, and then we'll look at them and unpack them a little bit more. The first is cultivating hope. Say that with me. Cultivating hope. The second is practicing critical awareness. Say that with me. Practicing critical awareness. And the third is letting go of numbing and powerlessness. Say that with me. Letting go of numbing and powerlessness. That's a little bit of a mouthful early in the morning. So hope. In her research, she researched some research that is being done at the University of Kansas in Lawrence. And at the University of Kansas, they are researching hope. I would like to be a college student. I'd like to just go, I really would, and explore all of these fascinating areas. I know, Emery, you're just recently out of it. You probably don't want to go back, but I'd like to go. Anyway, because I wouldn't have to take any tests. I just go for the learning. But anyway, in so many of the universities today, these kinds of what we would call maybe soft skills or the soft side of life are really being studied to try to understand their role and their importance in life, and that is such a good thing. That is such a good thing. So anyway, at the University of Kansas, as they have been looking at hope, one of the things they have researched and come to identify is that hope is not an emotion. It is about thinking. It is a way of thinking. Now stop for a moment and take that in. I think that's quite important. I think that's quite an insight. That hope is a way of thinking. And even more than that, it can be learned. It can be learned. It's a cognitive ability. We can learn it in places like this. We can support the learning of it one by one, friend to friend, conscious friend to conscious friend. One of the researchers at the University of Kansas who's focusing on this idea of hope or the importance of hope and that it is really not so much an emotion, it is a way of thinking, says it involves 3 things. It involves these things. It involves goals, knowing where you want to go. Goals, knowing where you want to go. It involves pathways, having an idea of how you're going to get there. It may not be a perfect idea. It may not work out exactly the way you think the how is going to work out, but at least from the get-go, you have some sort of idea of what those first steps might be. And then thirdly is agency, the feeling somehow inside, I can do this. I can do this. There have been so many critical moments in my life where I have felt afraid or felt not capable of doing something. And it's because somebody close to me, often my husband, but not always, somebody close to me saying, but Wendy, I believe in you. You're looking at the lowest common denominator in yourself right now. I believe in you. I know you can do this. And how powerful that is. Both to be on the receiving end of that. Have you ever been on the receiving end of that? Somebody looking you in the eye or just holding space for you and absolutely knowing you can do it? Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. All right, your mom. Yeah, my mom too. My mom too. I know you can do that. Have you ever been the giver of that? Yeah, and seen and felt what that can do to the other. I think this is why Jesus sent those guys out 2 by 2, so that they would do that to and for each other. In the research, they've said that hopelessness is dangerous because it leads to the feeling of powerlessness. We are not powerless people. We are incredibly strong. I love the definition of power from Martin Luther King Jr. He described power as the ability to affect change. Think about that. Power, the ability to affect change. Say that with me. The ability to affect change. Can you affect change in your life? Oh, I want a better answer than that. Can you affect change in your life? Absolutely you can. And the invitation to ourselves, I believe, is challenging ourselves to step into a greater degree of our own power. We don't have to get there all at once. I'm not sure that there's any such thing as being there all at once anyway. It is a growing and evolving and stretching into it a little bit more this year than we did last year. So one of the critical elements of the resiliency is hope. The second was the need to practice critical awareness. The need to practice critical awareness. What the research is suggesting, and I agree with it completely, how important it is for us to really check the messages that we are receiving from the world around us. To not be indiscriminate in what we allow to enter into our consciousness and remain. And remain. To be, as I think it was Emmett Fox used to say, to be a gatekeeper of our minds. A gatekeeper of our minds. Critically thinking, is what I'm hearing accurate? Is what I'm hearing accurate? It used to be so annoying sometimes when I was a kid and I was struggling with an assignment in school and I would turn to my dad for help. Because he would always challenge, how do you know what you just read is true? I don't know, Dad, it's in the book. They gave me the book, so it must be true. Our lesson time taught me so little about the subject and so much about life. And so much about how to think, and I appreciate that much more now. I did not appreciate it then. All I wanted to do was to get to the end of the assignment. Can you understand? Right? But as adults, we have to practice critical awareness, critical thinking. We get bombarded. What is it? The advertising industry is well over a $200 billion a year industry. I don't know who keeps track of things like this, but it is suggested that the average person receives over 3,000 kinds of ads a day. Even if it was half that, that's a phenomenal amount of input, of information from sources that just might not have your personal best interest at heart. Their interest at heart may be more about what? the bottom line financially. And this is where, the messages that we get through advertising sell more than products. If they only sold products, that wouldn't be nearly as potentially damaging as the fact that they sell an image of what success looks like. And we find ourselves seduced to comparing our ordinary lives with manufactured images. One of the most healing things we can do for ourselves is to catch ourselves when we are in the cycle of comparison and put the brakes on. The more we compare ourselves to someone or something else, the more likely we are to feel our joy and our satisfaction in living going down and down and down. Jesus said, "What is that to thee? Come thou follow me." Imagine if that was the approach we took to the bombardment of some of the kinds of messages we get that tell us what success looks like. If we were to say, no, I'm going to define for me what success is. I'm going to define for myself what wholehearted living looks like. I'm going to define for myself what purposeful and meaningful life looks like. The third that she addresses is the importance of understanding the danger of numbing ourselves to take the edge off of pain. Remember, this chapter is all about cultivating resilience, and usually the times in our lives that we're wanting and needing to be more resilient are times in our lives that are difficult times. Something has happened that is painful or surprising or somehow negative. We just didn't want this thing to happen. And she says that we've got to let go of the tendency that we have to numb ourselves of the pain. In her research, what she identified or what she found is that wholehearted people, the kinds of people I think we want to be, and for the most part probably are, she said that wholehearted people don't numb themselves into oblivion. They lean into whatever it is that they are feeling. They try to be able to name it to themselves. One of the most powerful things we can do with young people in teaching them emotional intelligence is to help them name and recognize feelings. And not just the good ones, and not just simple little, 3 or 4 feelings, but really to educate our children to be more aware of their feelings. Wholehearted people, she said, lean into those feelings. They can identify them. They are mindful of what it is that they are feeling. Doesn't mean they wallow in it. It doesn't mean that they make it bigger than what it is, but they feel it, because until we can feel it, we can't move beyond it. And what she found in people who aren't living in a place of wholeheartedness is the exact opposite. The false idea that somehow if they just numb themselves, whether it's with alcohol or drugs or food or shopping or sex or whatever it may be, so that they don't feel the authentic feeling that's going on. If you've done any sort of deep inner spiritual work, one of the things that you do know is that you cannot numb the dark without also dulling the light. You cannot numb the dark without also dulling the light. And so to be real with what it is that we feel is to be authentic, to be emotionally honest. Say that with me. To be emotionally honest. And to know that there is in our lives at least one other person with whom we can be emotionally honest, with whom we can say, this is what I'm really feeling about this scary time in my life, or about this painful time in my life. When we can name it, when we can feel it, it begins to lessen its hold on us. One of the things that I was so incredibly excited about and encouraged by when I first read her book, which was right after it came out, was the theme line that really does run throughout her entire book, which is about spirituality, and especially in this particular chapter. As she wraps up the chapter, she writes about how the question that she gets asked the most from her colleagues is spirituality a necessary component to resilience? Why do you think her colleagues, largely in academia, want to know, is spirituality really a necessary component of resilience? Why do you think they want to know that? Right, probably because they confuse religion with spirituality. Are they the same? No. How many of you consider yourself spiritual but not religious in this room? How many of you once were in a, quote, religion and felt like you just couldn't stay there? Yes, spirituality. That's why you're here. That's why I'm here. And quite honestly, I think spirituality is a little bit harder. Deep spiritual work is deep. Religiosity can remain on the surface. And for many people, I'm not saying it does for all, but for many people, it remains on the surface. It's an outer thing. Obedience, memorizing prayers, doing certain things, and not necessarily going deep into consciousness and deep into understanding the omnipresence of spirit. So spirituality is about recognizing that we are all part of something larger than ourselves, and that we and all of life is interconnected. That we are part of something larger than ourselves, and that we and all of life is interconnected, and that it is all grounded in the awareness of love and compassion. All grounded in the awareness of love and compassion. And so this is what she says to her colleagues who ask, is spirituality a necessary component for resilience? She says, emphatically, yes. Feelings of hopelessness, fear, blame, pain, discomfort, vulnerability, and disconnection sabotage resilience. The only experience that seems broad and fierce enough, I like those words, broad and fierce enough, to combat a list like that is the belief that we're all in this together and that something greater than us has the capacity to bring love and compassion into our lives. Can I have an amen for that? All right. All right. So I want to close with the quote that I began with that I like so very much, that while we cannot go back and make some of the details pretty, we can go forward and make the whole beautiful. Namaste.